If we're going to write really great essays for Section A, particularly if we're responding to a text like 9 Days, it's such a popular one, we need to be showing a close and perceptive understanding of the text. In order to do that, we need to know more than just what happens over the course of these 9 days and through these 9 sections of the novel. We need to be able to drill down into more specific sections. What you're going to see today is a really close look at 3 pages from the novel. I'm not going to read it out word for word from those 3 pages, but rather I'm going to point out some of the really small things that I noticed there that are actually indicative of much larger themes and will really help you show that type of depth of knowledge that your teacher and the examiner are really looking for. Everything that's mentioned in today's video has been sourced from the excellent study companion that we've put together for 9 days. There's a link to that up there in the description for this video if you'd like to take a look. It's basically a whole collection of really insightful and deep analysis that will really help you with this text. Jump into the description and jump onto our website if you want to take a look at a copy for yourself. But what we're looking at today, it starts off on page 24. And upon being kicked by the bullies, Kip mentions that it will come up in a bruise tomorrow. It hurts like buggery, but he can't feel the pain just yet. In fact, the direct quote is actually, "Right now it hurts like there won't be one." And it's one of those things that the first time I read it where I thought, this is a really interesting way that Jordan is making a point about grief, that she's talking about the pain and the emotional mental anguish that comes with a character like Kip in losing first his father and then his beloved sister, Connie. And the way that she does that is through this delayed pain of this kick that Kip has received. And the fact that he mentions that the bruise will come up tomorrow. And so when we start to take that out a little bit further and thinking about what might be being explored here, it's really this idea that these events, these things that can wound us and that can hurt us in our life, can actually come back years later, that the pain, that the bruising, that the memory of these things can actually hurt us in the instant, but also have these lingering effects that can come back later on. Also, the fact that Kip has registered that he's been kicked and that he can't feel the pain just yet is also indicative of what's happened to him with losing his father. He knows that it's happened. He's fully aware of that. Yet the pain perhaps hasn't fully set in yet. He hasn't actually had time to actually register just how deeply hurt he really is. If we jump out of this section to page 119, it's Charlotte that points out that it's the smallest actions that add up to leave the deepest marks. If we put that together with what we're looking at today from earlier on in the novel, we really start to think about what Jordan might be saying about the lingering effects of trauma and pain and how these characters are forced to deal with these things and the lasting impacts that it has upon their lives. So following on from the kick, Jordan then has the bullies point out the fact that Tom, Kip's father, didn't make any plans for the future. Okay, those men in gainful employment that neglect to make provision for their families, which when you first read it, you think, what an interesting thing for a bunch of teenagers to be saying. But the fact that Jordan has put it in there at that point really adds to the idea that these 3 pages in the novel are about the past, the present, and the future all being here, all in the one place. In the few minutes of action that happens here, Jordan's able to explore the past and the pain and what's happened to Kip. She's able to explore what's happening in the present, the beating that he's receiving, the pain that's there, but then also talk about a failure to plan for the future. And so the reason why we're diving into these 3 pages is that I want you to have a quick look at them, something that you can do quite quickly, and understand what they might be getting there and start to question what you think Jordan might be saying about the weaving of the past, the present, and the future. Further to that point, it's really telling, I think, that upon the mention of Kip's father, Kip actually says, "I'm no longer with those gorillas in the alleyway, but I'm back in the kitchen with Dad." And so even in the middle of this, traumatic event and this, beating that he's taking and this bullying that he's encountering, he's able to, disassociate himself from it. That he's not there with these gorillas. In terms of the pain and everything that he's had to deal with so far and endure, this is irrelevant what's happening to him. And he's able to mentally go back to the kitchen where he's back there with his father. So, further to that, we're now back in the past again, and that he's taken himself out of the present moment and put himself back in the past and reliving those days with his father. We then jump to the future as Kip realizes that there's no use worrying about repercussions if I'm not alive to, to deal with them. And so again, there's that jump. We've gone back to the pain of him losing his father and those days in the kitchen following Tom's death. And now he's realised that, well, there's no point worrying about the future if I'm not going to be alive to get there. So that need for survival, he has to find a way to get himself out of this situation. And so in this one moment, this kid is thinking about what's happening to him at the moment, worrying about what is going to happen to him in the future, and also thinking about what's happened to him before. And when we take that out and apply this sort of thinking to the entire text, we start to think of more examples about the way in which, there are stories that are told through time. There are things that happen in the past that have dramatic consequences upon the future. And this is just a more immediate way of Jordan being able to point out all of those ideas. Finally, on page 26, Kit points out that it stings like buggery now, but there's no time for that. And if we take that out a little bit, we start to see that essentially that's the way that Jean has instructed and led her children to deal with the death of their father, in that it stings like buggery, but there's no time to deal with that now. The immediate consequences following Tom's death sees Connie have to drop out of school. It sees Kip eventually drop out of school. It sees Francis, taking on the burden of having to be the man of the house and the successful one and all these types of things. And for me, what that really relates to is that Jordan is pointing out that, there's no time to grieve, that, there was too much of an immediate sense of needing to get on with it. And therefore, Kip is never able to fully grieve either of the family relations that he loses, both his father and his sister. When we take this out towards the end of the novel, and Annabelle actually points out when she's talking about the past that there was so much pain all covered over, we can really question what Jordan might be saying here about the need for people to grieve and to deal with the things that have happened to them, and the manner in which it can be hurtful to someone to hold on to pain, to hold on to grief, and to try to cover over those things, and how impossible it perhaps is for them to be able to actually do it. So guys, a really quick look at just 3 pages there. Please put your questions down below in the comments and we'll get to them there. Let me know anything else that you've noticed that you think there's some evidence that relates to these ideas from other pages. We would love to hear from you. If you've got friends that are studying 9 days, make sure you shoot them this video through so that they can jump into it as well. Take a look at all the other videos that are here on our channel. We'd love to help you out with all of your areas of study. As I said before, this is just one tiny snippet from our study guide that we've put together that's available up there in the description to the video. Jump on there and see if it's something that would be appropriate for you. I guarantee you'll get a lot out of it. Until we see you next time, all the best with your studying and good luck.